I remember the exact moment I turned the engine off, because it was one of those quiet pauses that only happen when a long day finally releases its grip on you, the dashboard lights dimming, the soft click of the ignition echoing briefly inside the car, and then silence settling in like a heavy blanket as I sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, not rushing, not thinking about anything urgent, just allowing myself a few minutes to exist without being pulled in any direction. The parking lot belonged to a familiar shopping center I'd visited countless times before. A wide stretch of asphalt framed by a grocery store, a couple of restaurants, and a fitness center, all bathed in the soft glow of early evening light. And while it wasn't empty, it wasn't crowded either, just busy enough to feel normal, with people moving in and out of their routines without paying much attention to anyone else. I had parked farther from the entrance than usual, partly out of habit and partly because those spaces were open, and after turning off the car, I leaned back slightly, exhaled, and stared ahead through the windshield, letting my thoughts slow down after hours of noise, emails, and conversations. Because sometimes that small moment of stillness inside a parked car feels like the only place where no one expects anything from you. I wasn't on my phone, I wasn't rummaging through the glove box, and I wasn't watching anyone else in the lot. I was simply sitting there, car off, keys resting in the cup holder, listening to the distant hum of traffic beyond the plaza and the occasional echo of shopping carts rattling across pavement. That's when I noticed movement to my left. At first, it was subtle, just a shift in the background that didn't immediately register as important. But when I turned my head slightly, I saw a woman standing near a large SUV a few spaces away, her posture stiff, her body angled toward my car in a way that felt deliberate rather than accidental. And although she appeared to be adjusting something in her trunk, her attention kept drifting back to me. I didn't think much of it initially, because parking lots are full of brief, meaningless glances between strangers, and it would have been ridiculous to assume anything more. So I turned my gaze forward again, letting my thoughts wander back to the day I'd just finished. But minutes passed, and the feeling didn't go away. Every time I glanced in her direction, she was still there, no longer pretending to organize anything, just standing with her arms crossed tightly against her chest, eyes fixed on my car with an intensity that felt out of place, her expression sharp and tense, as though she were silently accusing me of something I hadn't done. I shifted slightly in my seat, uncomfortable now, aware that whatever she thought she was seeing had already turned into a judgment, and I wondered briefly whether I should just get out and head inside to avoid whatever silent confrontation was brewing. But the idea annoyed me, because I hadn't done anything wrong, and the parking lot was a public space. As if responding to that internal hesitation, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, her movements quick and purposeful, and instead of texting or scrolling, she began dialing, pacing slowly back and forth while keeping her eyes locked on my car. It took a few seconds for the reality to sink in. She wasn't calling a friend. She wasn't checking a message. She was calling the police. The absurdity of that realization hit me first, followed by a slow, creeping frustration. Because the idea that someone would dial 911 simply because another person was sitting in a parked car with the engine off felt so detached from reality that it was almost laughable. If it hadn't been happening to me in real time, I cracked my window slightly and asked if there was a problem, my voice calm, measured, trying to diffuse whatever misunderstanding she had created in her mind. But she didn't respond at all, turning her body away from me as she spoke into her phone, her tone urgent and clipped, punctuated by gestures in my direction. I could hear fragments of what she was saying, words like "man sitting in a car, hasn't gotten out, just parked and stayed there, and I feel unsafe," each phrase stacking on top of the next until a harmless act was being reshaped into something suspicious, even dangerous, through repetition alone. I sat back, window still cracked, hands clearly visible, because I knew from instinct that leaving now could be twisted into something else entirely, and I didn't want to give her story any momentum beyond what it already had. But the waiting was unbearable in a quiet, heavy way. People walked past occasionally, glancing between us with mild curiosity before continuing on, unaware that an ordinary parking lot was quietly becoming the stage for a completely unnecessary escalation driven by assumption rather than reality. When the patrol car finally entered the lot, its presence felt louder than it actually was, the headlights sweeping across the pavement before coming to a stop nearby. And the moment the officers stepped out, the woman's posture changed, straightening instantly, her confidence visibly reinforced by the arrival of authority. She walked toward them quickly, speaking before they even finished closing their doors. pointing back at my car as though she had caught me in the act of something serious. Her voice animated, insistent, layered with the certainty of someone who expected immediate validation. One officer stayed with her while the other approached my car, his expression neutral, professional. He asked what was going on. I explained everything from the beginning, that I had parked, turned off my engine, and sat quietly for a few minutes before going inside, that I hadn't interacted with anyone, and that I had no idea why she felt threatened by my presence. My voice steadied despite the tension sitting in my chest. He glanced briefly at the dashboard, noting the dark display, the keys resting in the cup holder, the lack of movement or activity, and then asked for my ID, which I handed over without hesitation, because I knew I had nothing to hide. The woman cut in sharply, insisting that she knew suspicious behavior when she saw it, that people didn't just sit in cars without a reason, and that the police should intervene before something happened, her words tumbling out faster now, fueled by irritation rather than concern. The officer listened, then responded calmly, explaining that discomfort alone was not grounds for police action. That suspicion required more than a feeling, and that calling 911 was meant for emergencies, not for situations where someone was simply existing in a public space. He went on to explain, in a firmer tone, that misuse of emergency services could lead to consequences if it continued, because resources needed to remain available for people who were actually in danger, and that harassing someone without cause was not acceptable. The shift in her demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. Her confidence faltered, her posture stiffened, and for the first time since I'd noticed her watching me, she looked unsure, glancing around the lot as though hoping someone else might support her version of events, but no one did. The officers wrapped things up quickly after that, offering me a brief apology for the inconvenience before returning to their patrol car. And as they drove away, the parking lot slowly returned to its normal rhythm, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. The woman stood there for a moment longer, staring at the ground, then turned and walked briskly toward the store without looking back. Her sense of authority deflated, her assumptions left unfulfilled. Eventually, I stepped out and headed inside, blending back into the flow of ordinary life. But the experience stayed with me long after, because it revealed something unsettling about how quickly someone can decide that another person doesn't belong, even when they're doing nothing more than sitting quietly in a car they've already turned off.